All right, it's 10:01. I think this is a good time for us to get started with the webinar. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the HAPI-FHIR and Smile CDR, the HAPI-FHIR 6.2.1 and Smile CDR 2022.11.R01 release webinar. This release, we are codenaming the Vishwa release. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We will, of course, today be talking through all the new features, what's new, what's coming, all of that good stuff. So thank you for joining us. Before anything else, I will draw attention to the fact that over the last quarter, we have rebranded here at Smile CDR, our company, which was formerly known as Smile CDR Inc. We are now going by Smile Digital Health. And I think this name really reflects our sort of ever-increasing mission to transform and improve digital health and healthcare delivery in general. We are dedicated to the cause, and I think I'm personally really excited by this new name. You can see a little bit about our new visual identity here too. You'll see rainbows a fair bit and a bunch of nice colors and a bunch of our material these days, which I think is really fun. So what we'll be doing today, as I mentioned, we're going to be going through new features in the product, everything that we've added over the last quarter. We do, of course, do quarterly releases here at Smile of our two flagship products. And we'll be talking through everything that's happened over the last 3 months. We will talk a little bit about what we're going to be working on for the next 3 months. And as we've been doing for the last while, we will close off with a little Q&A session. So we'll start thinking about any questions you might have, and we'll get to those towards the end. So this is our 22nd named release since we started naming releases. I think I say this every time, but it blows me away that we've reached this far. Reaching the letter V in the alphabet, that is a lot of releases. And it's true, if you go and check out our changelog pages in either of our big documentation pages, you certainly do see a very long history. It spans quite a few years at this point, which that too just astonishes me how much traction and how much longevity this platform has. So there we go, 22 releases. Guess we'll have to figure out what we do when we reach the end of the alphabet. We haven't actually discussed that yet, so who knows what we'll do when we reach the end. But we've got a few more releases yet to go. Probably an exciting thing for anyone who's following these names is what are we going to do for the letter X? I have no idea. Not that many letters, not that many words even start with that. So we'll figure that one out. So what's in a name? Let's talk about the name Vishwa. Vishwa is a Hindi word. It means it's the Hindi word for universe, and takes on all kinds of interesting connotations from there. So we thought we'd talk a little bit just to kick things off around some fun facts that sort of surround that. I've got them all here up on the screen. All of these were really kind of new to me. I guess not all of them were, but most of them were. I had no idea it takes 6 hours to put on a spacesuit, but I suppose thinking about it, it does kind of make sense. Doesn't seem like it when you watch The Expanse, so I guess in the future maybe we get better and faster at doing that. The one thing that I did know is that the universe was flat. So there we go. That's cool. A couple of I don't know, interesting recognitions for Smile that I want to draw attention to. We're very excited about this. We were very honored over the last quarter to be recognized by Deloitte, not only as a Technology Fast 50 here in Canada, where we're headquartered, but also as a Fast 500 for North America. These are awesome awards, and we're very proud to receive them. Thank you very much to Deloitte for that recognition. We've also had another couple of recognitions we certainly want to mention here. We made it into the ROB top growing companies in Canada, which is certainly very proud for all of us here at home. I think that's really cool. Ton of work over the last quarter from our partnerships teams who've been working getting us into the AWS partner network. Perhaps in a future webinar, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for people that are using Smile and our customers on AWS. We do, of course, have tons of customers today deployed to the excellent AWS cloud. It's not the only cloud we support, but it is a really good one. Our partnership with AWS continues to strengthen, and we are doing very good things there. Very good deep integrations with a number of parts of the rest of their stack, which is awesome. We've also achieved a number of certifications from Drummond through the US-based certifications that are certainly hot topics these days. We've got those listed on the slide as well. That's exciting stuff for Smile CDR customers who are using us to attain certification. Also very significantly, and this is probably the most exciting thing to me personally that's happened over the last quarter, is our integration with a company called 𝐿4A. If you don't know 𝐿4A, you certainly should. 𝐿4A are absolutely pioneers in the domain of clinical reasoning. So 𝐿4A, among other things, are absolutely undisputable global experts in the CQL technology. Their expertise certainly doesn't stop there. All things reasoning. This is things like electronic decision support, electronic sort of support for clinical practice guidelines and those types of things. Really an absolutely excellent set of technologies and a really cool company, and a very, very awesome group of people have just decided to join us here at Smile. So welcome to the fold, 𝐿4A team. To everyone who is a customer either of Smile or of 𝐿4A, I look forward to great things to come from both of these technologies. I know the announcement to this generated a flurry of activity on the FHIR channels on Zulip, just around what does this mean for existing product stacks. I think at the next webinar we will have one of our new clinical reasoning team members come and talk to us about future plans and sort of what this all means and what this cool technology can do. Certainly the one point I want to make today, just to make sure that it's clear, 𝐿4A do support a pair of technologies, not unlike Smile. An open source platform known as the CQF Ruler, which is an open source implementation of the CQL execution environment, as well as an EDQM platform, which is sort of a beefed up commercial offering with a bunch of additional capabilities. That sort of mirrors Smile's own strategy, and certainly there's every plan to continue that. So if anyone is worried that the open source offerings are going to go away, they certainly won't. We are absolutely dedicated to those. We are also, of course, dedicated to better integration between the commercial products. So I think there will be something for everyone over the next while. And certainly, I think both teams recognize the absolutely incredible power that will come with these better decision support tools in terms of being able to unlock value from the investment that people are making around the world in FHIR, sort of transform our organizations and ultimately transforming care delivery. So really good things to come. And next webinar, we'll really dive into to what this all means for users. I'm looking forward to that. As we've been doing for the last while, we've got a playlist associated with this release. This is such a strange thing, but I just love it every time we do it. I'll make sure we publish this link. So if you don't have it right now, then don't worry about it, but feel free to quickly scan that QR code and bring up the Spotify playlist. This is a playlist contributed to by all of what we call the core developers who developed the core Smile CDR platform. A few songs that are interesting to them over the last quarter. There's one on there that came to me as well that I think is really cool. We're a little bit anonymous about who contributed what, though, so I don't know if anyone else will say who contributed what. Mine is the Chris Joss song. I'll say that. So what's new in this release? Let's move on to that. First thing I want to draw attention to is we are changing our versioning scheme for HAPI-FHIR users. This should not have any real impact to Smile CDR users, but to anyone who is using the open source platform, this will certainly at least have a minor impact on your life, at least if you're watching our bleeding edge releases. We've had kind of a strange versioning scheme over the last while. We've been using a scheme where we append the string pre to our releases, then we drop it when we go to release. We've decided that strategy was confusing to people. It wasn't something that we've ever seen anyone else do, and we just sort of fell into doing it because it seemed convenient. We've decided to try and standardize, do what the rest of the industry does, and what we've ultimately decided to do is mirror the versioning scheme that the Linux kernel uses. The way that they do it and the way that we will be doing it going forward is to continue to have a major release number, as we always do. We will continue to have a minor release number, but the minor release number will be odd for pre-release, as in for development builds, and will be even for release, for general availability builds. So this release that we're putting out today is 6.2. I'll say it's 6.2.0, but I'll correct myself in a moment. As soon as we have this release out the door, we will begin work on 6.3, the 6.3 series. And that will remain up until the next release, the next quarterly release, at which point we will immediately bump to 6.4. So the 6.3 series is only development builds, not intended for production use. 6.4 will be our next general availability release. I will say we've gotten so organized with testing these days. We hit feature freeze about 3 weeks ago, which is an excellent, just a great sort of testament to the team and the maturity of our release processes these days. We gave ourselves enough time to do testing that, of course, we managed to find something that we, after we had stamped our final build, that we just felt we couldn't release without fixing. So the GA release this time will be 6.2.1, not 6.2.0. There is no publicly available 6.2.0 because it had an issue that we didn't want to release with. So there we go. If you're a HAPI-FHIR user, 6.2.1 is the release that you want to target. First major feature we've added that I will mention, we are now supporting the FHIR R4B release. R4B, which comes with the version number, with the FHIR version number of 4.3.0. All of these versions are super confusing. It's kind of a strange release. It's essentially the FHIR R4 release with a handful of resources from R5 backported. This release is really mostly intended for bleeding edge users who are trying to test out the new capabilities that R5 will bring. FHIR R5, of course, is currently scheduled to be balloted and released early in 2023. And as far as I know, that's still on schedule. At this point, there are a number of limitations in that support. We haven't implemented subscriptions. We haven't implemented validation for FHIR R4B. And that's basically by design, because this is really only a testing release. R4B is not intended for production use. We will say that, of course, if that demand changes in the future, certainly that's a thing that we may decide to revisit. But our stance is that FHIR R4 is mandated by regulations in much of the world at this point. FHIR R5 is the next major release to come. So it's unlikely that we'll see much push to migrate to R4B. If that changes, of course, we will change our stance. We're certainly not trying to impose that on anyone, but simply trying to reflect the way that we see the world unfolding. In terms of other new features, so we've spent quite a bit of time implementing the various operations that are mandated by the Vinci IGs. This time around, we've implemented the submit attachment operation. Submit attachment is really intended for specific workflows between payers and providers, as mandated by the CDex implementation guide. This is just one leg in probably a giant stool of support for all kinds of these Da Vinci IGs that are coming. So there'll be a bunch more of these to talk about in future releases. But as we continue to develop CDex and continue to develop prior auth and continue to add features to our existing payer-to-payer solution, certainly more of these things will be implemented over time. We have put loads of effort over the last quarter into our CDA Import module. This is a module which takes in CCD documents, converts them into FHIR, and ultimately can store them in a repository. We have effectively been working through capturing all of the various data that is mandated by the USCDI specifications, so that we can convert the various CDA sections into the appropriate FHIR resources and elements within those resources. I've got some details here in the slides about the sections that we've added support for over the last quarter. Our change logs have a whole lot more detail on what's been added. It was really hard to fit just the relevant bits on a single slide for this. So tons of work has gone into CDA ingestion over the last quarter, which is awesome. MongoDB is another area that we continue to invest in. Our Mongo support today, we have primarily the biggest sort of implementation over the last quarter is we have finally got support for what MongoDB natively calls sharding. So this is a partitioning strategy, not unlike the existing relational database partitioning that we can do today. We now have support leveraging all of the same partitioning framework for MongoDB. It does native Mongo sharding, and ultimately this allows you to store vastly bigger quantities of data in MongoDB. We've experienced sort of limitations. Unsharded Mongo databases, there is a limit to how much data they can store. Once you've partitioned or sharded your Mongo collections, you can get a whole lot bigger. So I think this is going to be great for anyone who's trying to hit giant scale. A few other minor things we've done for Mongo. We've spent a bunch of effort beefing up the way that we do queries. So we now support date searching. We now support sorting with multiple values, as well as searching with OR conditions for a number of search parameter types. We've also added what we call trace performance for Mongo queries. This is a feature we've had for a long time on the relational side, where you can enable performance tracing and ultimately see the SQL that was generated for the database, as well as performance characteristics for how it executed. You can see that in response headers. You can see it in transaction logs, depending on how you configured the system. We never had anything equivalent for Mongo until now. If you've enabled that in Mongo, you will now see Mongo queries as they were submitted to Mongo. You'll see characteristics around how quickly they executed and that type of thing. And just like on the relational side, you can decide where those outcomes go, whether that's response headers or system logs or transaction logs. That's generally my favorite way to do it. We've also beefed up support for the everything operations. So everything now works with MDM expansion if you've got an MDM enabled Mongo database, which is actually a really cool combination. It's neat to see how all these things fit together. Bulk export, we do continue work on bulk export. Oops, went too far. Let's go back. Bulk export these days, we previously supported mostly the sort of real basics of bulk export, the sort of single patient view of it. We've now got a bunch of new modalities and a number of bug fixes added to the bulk export for what data gets returned. We've also migrated the bulk export to the batch 2 framework that we talked around last quarter, which means that bulk export becomes a much more robust, much more scalable operation. And this sort of allows us to enable support for canceling bulk export jobs and for polling them faster and that type of thing. We've also added support for effectively the specific G10 flavor of bulk export. If you're trying to G10 certify in the US, there are specific requirements for bulk export beyond what is outlined in basically the universal access bulk data access implementation guide around what data gets returned. We now support that fully. So if you're trying to G10 certify, the bulk export will fully meet those needs. Very good for anyone who's trying to do that type of certification. For anyone who's trying to stand up public-facing APIs, we've put a bunch of work into customization of the APIs. This includes the ability to customize the way that the Swagger UI pages look. If you're familiar with Swagger UI, it's a really nice way of visualizing REST APIs. And we've now got this really nice ability for you to change the logo that's on there, change a bunch of the text that's on there, so you can sort of make the Swagger UI look like your own corporate identity and not just the one that we ship. We've also got some new capability to customize the metadata that's exported in OpenAPI. So things like the software name and the version, you can sort of align that to your own product instead of just showing Smile CDR's own software name and version, or in the case of HAPI-FHIR, its name and version. So a bunch more customizations there. Certainly we recognize that oftentimes people want to create FHIR interfaces that are branded as their software and not ours. And that is absolutely a workflow that we want to support. On the traceability front, we've spent quite a bit of effort here as well. we've sort of harmonized requests as they come in. So now every request that comes in, this is certainly diving into the technical a little bit, we include a new unique GUID for every HTTP transaction that is received, and that GUID will get persisted within audit logs and transaction logs. Can now be searched within those logs as well. So there's some new UI for searching for specific transactions and tying them together using those GUIDs that are added. We have completely rewritten our database migrator. This is kind of a strange one, but ultimately I think a very useful one. We have been using for the last several years for migration between releases of HAPI-FHIR and Smile CDR, a tool called FlyWayDB. FlyWay is a great tool. It's an open source library with lots of community uptake for doing database migrations, and it's provided us lots of value over the years. But truth be told, we have really struggled with their policy towards database support. They traditionally supported a wide range of databases and versions of those databases, but have been sort of restricting that recently so that their open source product really only handles very current versions of the major platforms. You know, the most recent release of SQL Server, for example, which has been problematic because we know there are many customers out there who are, and many for that matter, HAPI-FHIR community members who use these products on older versions of the relational database products. And of course, they do that because of corporate policies or corporate standards and those types of things, and don't always have the option to migrate right away. We have found that limitation to be, well, let's say stifling and certainly problematic over recent times. It's generated quite a bit of support activity for us. So we've decided to bite the bullet and implement our own database migrator that's modeled a little bit after FlyWay, but ultimately does its own thing and won't be limited by specific database support. So we can always commit that it will support the same versions of database platforms that our software itself supports. So that should be good, and will hopefully allow us to be a little bit more flexible in terms of supported database technologies. A couple of quick enhancements I'm going to whip through. This was such a big list. It was really hard to decide what to include in the slides. We've got so many enhancements this time around that there we go. I've got one slide for HAPI-FHIR and one slide for Smile CDR to talk through. We did fix a really critical bug for anyone who handles batch transactions on HAPI-FHIR. If you're processing batch bundles and using certain interceptors, notably the search narrowing interceptor, we did see a log O squared slowdown. Effectively, what that means is as you add more entries to your batch, your system would get sort of exponentially slower in processing that batch. That's been corrected. That was a regression in a recent release of HAPI, and that's been fixed. The CLI tools that you can use for uploading terminology, that includes the HAPI-FHIR CLI and the Smile util commands, can now stream much larger terminology files into your server. Previously, you were required to do file system copies and refer to them by file system address. You can now stream them up from a remote system. There's a configurable threshold for how large the CLI is allowed to take, which is great. Normalized quantity searching, which is such a cool feature. If we had more time, I'd drone on about normalized quantity searching. Effectively, this for quantitative measurements allows you to search using a unit of your choice, and the system will automatically normalize the unit and search irrespective of what unit the source data is using. There was a notable gap in that support. It didn't support temperature normalization. In other words, normalization between Celsius and Fahrenheit. That has been implemented now, so we now support that fully. We have completely at this point dropped support for the Spring Batch platform. And this means that all of our batch processes have now been migrated to the new Batch 2 framework, which is awesome. This is Batch 2 brings us great scalability. It's really good for robustness. So I'm very excited by the amount of work that took. That single bullet was just a staggering amount of work over the last quarter. And I'm really happy it's done so we can focus on other things and continue to beef up the Batch 2 framework, which does continue continuously get improvement as we go along. Certainly that will benefit both HAPI-FHIR and Smile CDR users. And finally, we have on the full text indexing front, finally added support for AWS OpenSearch. OpenSearch is a fork of Elasticsearch and has many similar features. There's a good long story from AWS in terms of how they got there. This has been a common demand for supporting that for people that want to use OpenSearch. We now do have full support for that. On the Smile CDR side, whoops, gone too far. Oh no. There we go. On the Smile CDR side, we have added support for AWS's IAM platform. So if you're deploying to AWS, you can now authenticate using IAM. This means no more storing database credentials in Smile CDR configuration. They can be automatically pulled from the environment, which is always a good security stance to take. So if you're an AWS user, we'd highly recommend looking into that. A bit that I'm particularly excited about, and I guess that's partly because I helped work on it, we've added a new section to our online documentation. And this is not actually Smile CDR specific. This would benefit HAPI-FHIR folks as well, but it is on the Smile CDR documentation. This is a new section called the FHIR standard. We're using this to sort of consolidate documentation around the FHIR standard itself. We had bits and pieces all over the place in terms of how to do specific things. And we've decided let's turn that into a single coherent tutorial that goes through how to use the FHIR standard and specifically focuses on advanced topics like how to build FHIR path expressions for complicated types of custom search parameters and how all the various mechanisms in FHIR transactions work, those types of things. We've got pages for those. This is a work in progress. We're going to continue to add to it. It's not a particularly long section yet, but our plans long-term are to continue to improve that. I will say we have put loads of work into our HL7 v2 ingestion. I spoke about CDA a few moments ago and our ability to convert CDA documents into FHIR. HL7 v2 is equally important to us. Notably, we originally wrote the HL7 v2 module when FHIR's STU3 release was the current release, and we came to realize that we had a number of sort of, I'll call them STU3 isms in our conversion. Things like terminology URLs, we're using the non-R4 version. We had extensions in slightly wrong places that had changed between versions. So all of that has been corrected for HL7 v2 listeners when working in R4 mode. And we have added a validation that will sort of ensure that any future enhancements we make to this module will continue to conform to both the FHIR core standard as well as the US core implementation guide. Finally, one little feature we've added that I think is kind of neat is a feature called response watermarking, which effectively injects a transaction ID, it's that same transaction GUID that I spoke about moments ago, into response payloads. And this is done effectively so that if data is ever discovered in places you don't expect it to be, there's a bit of a traceability mechanism that allows you to go back and figure out what was the transaction that was ultimately used to release this data, what was the user, or who is the user rather, what client were they using, those types of things. So this gives a bit of traceability in terms of where did data come from. And there we go. I will say this release, both for HAPI-FHIR and for Smile CDR, the raw number of changes is as big as it's ever gotten. This is a record-breaking change set that's in this release. Very proud of the team for all of the hard work that's gone into this release. I don't have nearly the amount of time that we would need to go through all of it, so I will say do check out the change logs. The slide is here. There are extensive change logs that go through all of the new features that we've added, and well worth giving it a look to see what's in there. I don't know why that's there. I already spoke about submit attachment. Let's talk quickly about AppsFHIR. The AppsFHIR platform, of course, does continue to expand. Notably, we have added this, what we've called app request capability for improving administrative workflows. And really what this is talking about is anyone who is at an organization that is deploying AppsFHIR for managing apps, either for internal users or more likely for consumers, for patient or member users out in the public. Your internal approval processes will have technical steps like making sure that all of the right right attestations have been signed, and that keys are present and scopes have been approved and all of those good things. But there are often additional steps in the workflow that extend beyond the basic sort of technical steps that we've accounted for. And we've now got processes and tooling to support those processes that will allow you to integrate those into your own approval workflows, which is great. We've also beefed up the controls for things like token validity, as well as a bunch of the support that we give for registering support. And much of this comes down to effectively requirements that are coming out of the G10 regulations. So G10 does mandate a whole bunch of useful, frankly, steps in terms of app registration. AppsFHIR now fully complies with all of that, and we continue to enhance the AppsFHIR platform as regulations unfold and we gain knowledge in terms of how people are using this platform. So lots of good stuff there for sure. Equally, on the payer-to-payer world, for anyone who is using us in the payer landscape, we have now got an integration with AWS Cognito. It's very exciting stuff for anyone who is deploying us into AWS. We've also, and this is actually, it's a single bullet, but I know a lot of work went into this. We've now got support for multiple health plan transfers at the same time. So lots of work has happened over the last quarter. Plans for the payer-to-payer data exchange module for the next quarter they just get all the more exciting. I've got all of this listed up on the slide. We're going to work on WCAG support. This is accessibility support. We're beginning work on prior auth, so we should have prior authorization support and transfer abilities baked into the platform pretty quickly for that. We are working on what is called member-directed exchange. So this is a sort of a back-end system-to-system module for payer-to-payer that solves a bunch of authentication challenges that we know people are having with the what's called the member-mediated, or sort of the right user upfront non-system-to-system version of that. So lots of work that's going on there. And then the single bullet that is probably the hardest problem that anyone has to solve for these types of things, the classic issue of delegation. So managing delegate access to data and providing workflows that allow you to do that securely and with full knowledge of who you're delegating to and who you have delegated to. So lots of work is going on that is behind that single bullet point on that slide. Absolutely. What else is coming in terms of the platform? Over the course of the next quarter, we do expect that by the time we hit our February release, R5 will be either final or very near to final. We do, of course, have current sort of integration support today for R5, but we do expect that as it's finalized, we will finalize as well and sort of add production-ready support for FHIR R5. We're very excited for that. We will be working on write operations for the gateway. Our gateway module has been really a runaway success. I'm always amazed by the things people do with the gateway. But notably, it's a read-only product today. So over the next quarter, we'll be adding the ability to do write operations. Probably the single most exciting thing to me is the addition of both the clinical reasoning team and the clinical reasoning product to the product family. I'm not going to say anything more about that this quarter because I really want to leave it to the team themselves to talk about that next time. So we'll really dive into the excitement around DQM next time. That's going to be great. And of course, we will continue to work on some priority modules, including MDM, which is another one that's become very, very popular, and the CDS hooks module, which allows you to build up CDS hooks servers. That's good stuff. And on the AppsFHIR front, of course, we're going to be adding all kinds of information for registering clients that are doing various sort of bulk export operations. The ability to register a client which is only doing system level bulk export, for example, that's not possible today through AppsFHIR, but will be soon, as well as a bunch of other enhancements that we just spoke about for AppsFHIR. One other one, then, this is kind of a slow burn. This is actually a feature that's been in the works gradually for, I want to say at least 6 months, probably longer than that. There's actually pre-release versions of it sort of hidden in current releases even, but we haven't gone live with it yet. We are just about to flip the switch and turn this on for our upcoming February release. As of February, we'll be rolling out an upgrade to our web admin console for Smile CDR. The rollout includes a just dramatically improved UI. I've played with it a bunch, and I just love everything that's gone into it. Everything is simpler. It's more visually appealing. There are buttons that remain on screen instead of having to scroll up and find the save button, for example. There's some really nice integrated troubleshooting in the solution that helps you sort of find any configuration issues or performance warnings with your setup. So really looking forward to rolling out the new web admin console. And of course, at Giant, congratulations to the team who've worked on that. A few things I'll draw attention to. We've got a couple of white papers that we've released on our website. We've got them listed here. We'll also be at the HIMSS Ontario chapter event on November 29th. I believe that's in Toronto. Well, I'm actually not sure, but I think it is. So that will be worth checking out. And that takes us to the end. Oof, I didn't even manage to hit the 30-minute mark. It's so hard to figure out what to say over these things. We're really straining the ability to communicate everything in 30 minutes, but there we go. We went a little bit over. See if we can do better next time. I would like to welcome to the virtual stage Ken Stevens and Megan Pete, both from Smile as well. We've got time for some questions. So if anyone has got questions about really anything, product roadmaps, features we've added, what the weather is like. It's going to snow like crazy here today. If you want to talk about that, we would love to hear about it.
Yes, absolutely. So we don't have any questions in the chat so far, but please feel free to add in your questions and I will make sure that they get read. But in the meantime, I did want to ask, the both of you, what feature are you like the most excited about, or what, I don't know, what are you really proud of for this release?
Fun. Ken, you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I'd say for me, it's converting everything to batch 2, and just removing all the Spring Batch infrastructure from the server. We've actually seen, with Alphora joining, doing some really exciting new things with parallelizing evaluate measure to make it super scalable. I'd say that's the thing I'm the most excited about.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'll give a different answer, but I do absolutely want to echo what Ken said. It's funny. I mean, this conversion, we've spoken about it, I think, at least over the last 2 webinars. The timeline is a bit of a blur to me, but it's been at least 2 quarters, if not more than that we've been slowly chipping away at moving everything on. First building a new batch framework, and then ultimately moving our various batch processes into the new framework. All of this, I mean, really what we're, the reason that we've put all this work into what is ultimately kind of a thankless task. I mean, it's not exactly sexy stuff that we're implementing new batch processes that don't add new features. They just do the existing ones better. It's not great from a marketing perspective, but the reason this stuff is important is we're seeing Smile CDR and HAPI, for that matter, getting used at ever increasing scales. Just the amount of data that people are putting into servers, the number of transactions they're putting through FHIR servers is absolutely through the roof. It's incredible to me that the size, the scale that people are using a FHIR-based data fabric for these days. And we know that trend is going to continue. I mean, things are only going to get bigger, and we're excited for that, but we do recognize that we need to have infrastructure that will allow for things like, search parameter reindexing and bulk export and mass ingestion of data, all those things that you need to do if you want to do FHIR at real scale. You need to be able to do those in ways that can flex up and down and take full advantage of big wide clusters and not fall over if there's too much data in the jobs. And for that matter, have good instrumentation on how those jobs are doing, so that you know where the job is at and when it's going to finish and all of those things. Everything I've just said, I mean, this is the what's what of why we've put all this work into batch 2, and we're so excited to see that work done. I certainly want to echo Ken's. I mean, for myself, I'll say the thing that I'm most excited over the next quarter is, it's a minor thing perhaps, and I just spoke about it, but it's the web admin console improvements. Definitely got to give a shout out to Jason Bhaskaram from our core product team, from our core projects team rather, who this has been, he's not the only one who's worked on it by any means, but this has been his pet project for probably the last year. I don't know the exact timeline, somewhere between 6 and 12 months he's been working on this, and he's done such a great job. I'm so excited to have screenshots to show off at the next webinar, so we can show how that's looking. It's a really neat little piece of technology.
Yeah, he's been campaigning for it really, really hard, and I've seen some glimpses, and I'm very excited for it as well. It's definitely something I'm excited for. I'm refraining myself from asking more about our clinical reasoning team because we'll hear from them next thing. But I know I'm very excited about that. I think that's really exciting news. Just one question: how do you talked about it a bit there, but how do you decide between like new, exciting, shiny new features, and you talked about plenty of those today, and then the balance between that and going back to something like improving your bulk operations and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really tough one. I mean, I'm curious, Ken, if you've got any insights there. But I'll say we certainly don't have a one size fits all strategy for that. I mean, the constant balance in anyone's software development, certainly not only our own, but I mean, it absolutely applies to us. We're building products like anyone else. It's sort of, really handling three competing priorities. I mean, you've always got, big ticket feature development, whether that's stuff that you're doing as R&D for, just to drive forward the industry, or whether you're implementing big features that are being specifically asked for by a customer or many customers. I mean, the big ticket feature development is important. But then you've always got the second priority of sort of the tech debt stuff, the improvement that is less user visible, but always has to get addressed. I mean, you absolutely can't allow tech debt to accumulate to the point where you've got an unsupportable platform. So we do put a load of effort into that. And then, of course, you've got a third priority because there's always going to be bugs. I mean, in the world of software, as much as you wish that there were no bugs, you're always going to be tackling those. There's always going to be, somebody found a problem and it's got to get fixed. And I mean, balancing those three things is hard. It really is a tough thing. I feel like, I don't think we have a hard and fast metric for how we balance those three priorities, but I would say, at least conceptually, we probably do give them equal weight. And I think if we were to measure in developer hours, how much goes into those things, I mean, I'm sure we do actually, and probably could provide those numbers, but I don't have them in front of me today. They probably would be roughly 30% each. I mean, we do try to evenly balance all of those things to keep the platform both moving forward, but also not dragging its feet behind it. I guess that's maybe the right way to look at it from a weird metaphor perspective.
I think I'd add a fourth item to that list, and that's performance. And we've invested quite a bit in this past quarter on automated performance testing on the major databases and on Mongo, and for all the operations, what's the reindex performance, bulk export, et cetera, et cetera. That turned out to be a harder problem than I expected and took longer to get there. But we are now really in a good spot where we can see how the performance of all the major operations are changing by release, and really hone in on performance issues before customers report them to us. So
yeah, that's a great one for sure.
Cool, thank you. I think it's really exciting that we do both. Like, it's not just we're throwing things to the wayside, and how you guys manage to balance everything. We are very quiet on the questions today. I think maybe people are just really looking forward to the next release, or they're puzzling through this current release. So I just want to thank both of you so much for your time. I'm sure there's plenty of ways to get a hold of you guys if people do come up with questions later. And then I believe, all of the release notes and stuff will be up on our websites and the docs and stuff like that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in 3 months.